Okay, I want you to picture the scene. It's chaotic. It's loud. We are in a courtroom in Lower Manhattan, and this was just 2 weeks ago, Friday, February 6th, 2026.
Right.
And you know that feeling in a courtroom? Right. That sort of humid, stuffy air. You've got lawyers shuffling papers. The bailiffs are looking bored. The gallery is just packed. I mean, shoulder to shoulder with reporters, sketch artists, a few looky-loos.
The usual bureaucratic hum, as they say.
Exactly. And right in the middle of all of that, the defendant stands up.
Luigi Mangione.
The man himself. The face that has been on every screen in America for, what, over a year now? He's wearing that standard prison tan uniform. His wrists are cuffed in front of him.
And usually, this is the part of the proceeding where the defendant is supposed to just sit there stone-faced
Yeah.
and let their very expensive lawyers do all the talking for them.
But not Mangione. He just snaps, he turns, faces the gallery, his eyes are wide, and he just starts screaming.
1 + 1 is 2. Double jeopardy by any common sense definition.
It wasn't a mumble either. It was this full-throated shout. He's yelling about arithmetic and legal principles while the court officers are physically grabbing him and hauling him out of the room. It was raw. It was totally unpolished.
And, it was kind of the perfect encapsulation of this entire situation.
How so?
It just shows how messy, how loud, and how deeply, deeply confusing this whole thing has become. Because here we are, it's Wednesday, February 18th, 2026.
Right.
We are 14 months, almost to the day, removed from the event that kicked this whole thing off. The killing of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson right outside that Hilton in Midtown.
And if you thought that, a year would bring some clarity to this,
You would be very wrong.
completely wrong. It's only getting more complicated, more political, and honestly, just more bizarre with every passing day.
Which is exactly why we're doing this today. This needs a proper deep dive.
It really does. Look, if you're just looking for a straight-up true crime recap, who got shot, where the bullets landed, what color the getaway bike was, you can find 1,000 of those on YouTube.
Right. That's not what this is.
No, that is not our mission here. What we're doing
Uh-huh.
today is a deep dive into a collision.
A massive three-way collision. It's the only way to describe it.
Exactly. You've got three totally different worlds just smashing into each other. First, you have a high-profile assassination that, it targeted the very infrastructure of American healthcare.
Then second, you have the legal battle. And this isn't just any legal battle. It is so chaotic and unprecedented that it's quite literally rewriting the playbook on state versus federal jurisdiction. It's a total legal labyrinth.
And then there's the third part, which to me might be the weirdest part of all. This dystopian cultural moment where a murder suspect has somehow become a Gen Z fashion icon and a kind of folk hero.
It is so much to unpack. And to do it right, we have pulled together a pretty massive stack of sources. We are not just skimming headlines here.
So,
We're looking at the actual court transcripts from the hearing just this month, February 2026. We've got the internal logs from the body cam footage of the arrest way back in Altoona, Pennsylvania.
we've also got some really dense but crucial legal analysis from law reviews, specifically about the suppression hearings.
And what I find fascinating, some really interesting sociological data about how the public is actually reacting to all this. Polls, social media sentiment analysis, that kind of thing.
So yeah, buckle up. We're going to walk through the target, the hunter, the arrest that might just be legally doomed, and this whole folk hero thing that has everyone scratching their heads.
So where do we start?
Let's start with the people, because before he was a hashtag and long before he was a victim, Brian Thompson was a very real, very powerful man.
He absolutely was. And I think to really understand the gravity of what happened,
Yeah.
you almost have to strip away the victim label for a second and just look at him as an executive.
Yeah.
Brian Thompson was the CEO of United Healthcare. He wasn't just, some cog in the machine. He was running the machine. This is an entity that insures tens of millions of Americans. It's a massive, massive corporation.
And when you're at the top of a pyramid that big, the compensation, it tends to reflect that.
Right. Public records show he was earning about $10.2 million annually. Now, look, in the world of Fortune 500 CEOs, that's a ton of money. But it's not necessarily an anomaly. It's in the ballpark.
But the controversy wasn't just about the size of his paycheck, was it? It was about where that money was coming from.
Exactly. At the time of his death, United Healthcare was under intense scrutiny. We're talking multiple federal investigations and a huge amount of public outcry over their denial rates.
And this is really the core of the friction, isn't it? It's the fundamental business model of modern for-profit insurance.
It is. I mean, if you boil it down to the simplest, coldest terms, an insurance company makes money by taking in premiums and then paying out as little as possible in claims.
Right. Maximize input, minimize output.
Precisely. Now, the companies would argue they're just preventing fraud, they're controlling costs, they're stopping unnecessary procedures. But the critics, and that includes, by the way, the Department of Justice, they argued that these companies were using algorithms and just mountains of bureaucratic hurdles to systematically deny necessary care, all to boost their profit margins.
And that context, it isn't just background noise for this story. It's literally etched into the crime scene itself.
It really is. We're talking about the shell casings found on the sidewalk there in Manhattan. They weren't just standard brass casings.
No, they had words written on them in permanent marker. Delay, deny, and depose.
Or defend, depending on which of the very early reports you read. But yeah, depose seems to be the consensus in the final forensic reports. And those specific words, they matter immensely.
Because they're a direct reference.
A direct reference to a strategy that's long been attributed to the insurance industry. Delay, deny, defend.
So for anyone listening who might be lucky enough to have never had a major claim denied, let's break that down. What does that strategy actually mean in practice?
It's basically a strategy of attrition. Delay is the first step.
Yeah.
You delay payment or approval for as long as possible. The hope is the claimant just gets desperate or frustrated and gives up.
Okay.
Then you deny. You deny the claim based on some obscure technicality or a very vague definition of what is or isn't medically necessary.
And if they don't give up, if they fight back,
Then you defend. You defend that decision aggressively in court, knowing that you have deeper pockets and more lawyers than they do. It's a playbook that is fundamentally designed to use the customer's own exhaustion as a tool to protect your revenue.
So from the very first moments the police arrived on scene, it was clear. This wasn't just a random shooting. It was a message. It was a critique written in gunpowder.
Precisely. It was political theater as much as it was a homicide. And the man delivering that message, Luigi Mangione.
Yeah.
And this is where the story just gets so incredibly disorienting.
Because on paper, he's the last person you'd expect.
The absolute last person. If you looked at Luigi Mangione's resume, say, 2 years ago, you would never, ever see an assassin. You'd look at it and say, this kid is going to run a successful tech startup or, become a venture capitalist.
Absolutely. The whole golden boy narrative is strong here for a very good reason. But let's just look at the pedigree for a second.
Okay.
He was the valedictorian at the Gilman School in Baltimore. For those who don't know, that is an extremely elite, very expensive prep school. From there, he goes to the University of Pennsylvania, an Ivy League school.
And gets a master's degree in computer science on top of that.
So he's not just smart, he's verifiably brilliant.
And he comes from prominent family, too. I mean, it's not like he was some outsider. His cousin is a politician in Maryland. He had every single door wide open for him. He wasn't on the fringes of society. He was being groomed for the very center of the elite track.
And his career path reflected that. He worked at TrueCar. He was doing that whole digital nomad thing out in Hawaii for a while, living what looked like a picture-perfect Instagram life.
He even co-founded his own gaming company, right? Uproar Studios?
He did. He was building a life that, frankly, a lot of people would kill for, no pun intended. So the question that everyone has been asking for 14 months now is, what happened? How do you go from Ivy League valedictorian to screaming about double jeopardy in a murder trial?
The sources all seem to point to this collision point, a collision between his physical health and his mental state, that really seems to have begun around 2023. Mangione suffered from a condition called spondylolisthesis.
Spondylolisthesis. Wow, that sounds incredibly painful just to say. What is it?
It's a spinal condition.
Mhm.
And basically, in layman's terms, one of the vertebrae in your spine slips forward over the bone below it. This creates severe instability and, for most people, chronic, debilitating pain.
So we're not talking about a bad back you get from sitting in an office chair too long.
Not at all.
Yeah.
We're talking about sharp nerve pain, loss of function in your legs, constant agony. It can be absolutely agonizing.
And chronic pain like that, it changes people. It
Yeah.
fundamentally rewires your brain.
It does. It puts your body in a constant state of stress. It erodes your patience. It erodes your empathy, your ability to think clearly about anything other than the pain.
And he had surgery for it.
Yes, he had spinal fusion surgery in July of 2023 to fix it. But according to his own writings, the recovery it didn't go as planned. He wrote a lot about experiencing brain fog.
Brain fog.
Yeah, he felt like he was losing his cognitive edge, the very thing that had always defined him, the thing that made him the golden boy. He felt it slipping away.
And that seems to be the pivot point, because in 2024, he ghosts everyone, and I mean everyone.
It was a complete digital and physical disappearance. He stops posting on social media, which for a guy in the tech and gaming space is a pretty big red flag. He stops returning calls and texts from his friends, from his family.
He just vanishes.
He travels to Asia, goes completely off the grid for a while, and then he resurfaces in New York City with a very, very different mission in mind.
And that brings us to the real aha moment of this entire profile. We have the diary entries that were unsealed by the court back in June of 2025. And this is where you see that stark disconnect between the privileged upbringing and his dark internal monologue.
Right. He wasn't just angry about his medical situation. He was, it seems, ideologically radicalized against the entire system.
He uses some very specific language.
Very specific. He describes the healthcare industry as a parasitic cartel. He wrote that these companies literally extract human life force for money. That's a direct quote.
Extracting human life force. It's almost vampiric imagery.
It is. And it suggests that in his mind, he didn't see Brian Thompson as a person anymore. He saw him as the living avatar of a system that was eating people alive.
Which leads to that other chilling quote from his manifesto.
These parasites simply had it coming.
When you frame it that way, in your own mind, it removes the moral weight of murder. He wasn't killing a father or a husband or a son. In his mind, he was exterminating a pest.
It's a terrifyingly effective rationalization.
So he's in New York. The shooting happens on December 4th, 2024. Then we have this massive citywide manhunt. And 5 days later, we get the arrest in Altoona, Pennsylvania. And honestly, the details of this arrest, if you wrote this in a movie script, the producers would send it back and say, it's too cheesy, it's too on the nose.
He gets caught at a McDonald's.
While eating a hash brown?
You really can't make it up. But we need to slow down here, because this arrest, specifically what happened inside that McDonald's, is the single most contested issue in this entire legal case right now. It is the definition of fruit of the poisonous tree.
Okay, let's break that down for everyone. Fruit of the poisonous tree. It sounds like something out of a fantasy novel, but it's a critical legal doctrine in the U.S. How does it actually work?
It comes from a really old Supreme Court case, Silverthorne Lumber Cove, United States. And the idea is actually quite simple. If the police obtain evidence illegally, if the tree itself is poisoned, then any other evidence they find because of that initial illegal act is the fruit, and that fruit is also tainted.
Meaning you can't use it in court.
Exactly. It's inadmissible.
So take us back to that McDonald's. It's December 9th, 2024. A very sharp-eyed employee recognizes Mangione from the photos the NYPD have been blasting everywhere. They call it in. The local police arrive. What happens next?
Officer Christy Wasser and her partner approach him. They see him sitting in a booth. He matches the description. And then comes the critical moment, which we have on body cam footage. Officer Wasser grabs his backpack and looks inside.
Without a warrant.
Without a warrant.
Yeah.
And inside, she finds a loaded magazine for a pistol wrapped in a pair of underwear.
And that's when we get that famous quote from the body cam that went viral almost instantly.
It's him, dude. It's him, 100%.
You can just hear the relief and the adrenaline in that officer's voice.
Oh, absolutely. They had just caught the most wanted man in America. But here is the massive legal problem.
Yeah.
The defense is arguing that she searched that bag before she had a warrant and before she had clear probable cause to believe he was actively armed and dangerous at that moment.
So wait, don't the police need a warrant to just open your backpack? I thought that was, Fourth Amendment 101.
Generally, yes. It protects against unreasonable search and seizure. There are exceptions, though, and the big one they're trying to use here is called exigent circumstances, basically, if there's an immediate threat to public safety.
So what was the immediate threat?
This is where the police narrative gets a little, let's say, complicated. Right. Officer Wasser testified in the suppression hearing that she wanted to check the bag for bombs.
Bombs!
Yes. She claims she was worried he might have an explosive device in the backpack.
Okay, let's just play this out logically. If you are a police officer, you're in a crowded McDonald's on a Monday morning, and you truly believe the suspect in front of you has a bomb in his backpack, what is the very first thing you do?
You get everyone out. You evacuate the restaurant, you call the bomb squad, you create a perimeter.
Right. What you definitely don't do is stand right next to the guy, lean over the potential bomb, and casually unzip the bag yourself.
Precisely. But they didn't do any of that. They didn't evacuate a single customer. They didn't call the bomb squad. In fact, under cross-examination, Officer Wasser explicitly testified, "No, I didn't find a bomb yet," when she was asked if she called them.
That's a huge contradiction. It creates a logical paradox for the prosecution.
It's a massive one. And the defense is hammering it. They're arguing that either A, you really thought there was a bomb, in which case you acted with incredible recklessness by not evacuating, or B, you didn't really think there was a bomb, and you just used that fear as a fake pretext to conduct an illegal, warrantless search.
It sounds like they're trying to reverse engineer a justification for the search after the fact.
That is exactly what the defense is claiming. And it gets even weirder.
Yeah.
There's the issue of the 11-minute gap.
Ah, the missing footage. This never, ever looks good in a criminal case.
It's a prosecutor's nightmare. So after they arrest him, they put Mangione in the patrol car and begin transporting the evidence, the backpack, to the station. For 11 minutes during that transport, the body cams were turned off.
What's the official reason?
The police have said it was just standard procedure during transport, maybe a technical glitch, battery issues. But in a murder case, this high-profile, an 11-minute blackout where the key evidence is being handled, that's a giant open door for a defense attorney.
Because they can argue that anything could have happened in those 11 minutes. They can argue the chain of custody was broken. They can imply evidence was planted or tampered with.
Exactly. Not that it likely was, but the mere possibility is sometimes all you need to create reasonable doubt.
And we have to talk about what else they found in that bag, because it wasn't just a magazine and some underwear. It was a prosecutor's dream.
Oh, it was everything. It was a treasure trove of incriminating evidence.
They found what the media has been calling the manifesto. It's a 262-word, handwritten document, and it was addressed to the feds.
In it, he claimed the act was completely self-funded. He apologized for the trauma he caused, but then immediately wrote, "These parasites simply had it coming."
Oh.
He also had the diary where he methodically lay out his reasoning, at one point writing, "Insurance checks every box for a justifiable target."
And of course, the gun. We can't forget the gun.
The ghost gun. And this is another crucial technical detail. The weapon was a 3D printed Glock 19 style handgun, and it even had a 3D printed suppressor.
Can you explain for the listener who might not know, what exactly makes a gun a ghost gun?
It means it's unserialized and therefore untraceable. If you buy a Glock from a licensed dealer, the frame has a serial number that is registered to you. With a ghost gun, you print the frame, the part that is legally considered the firearm, at home on a 3D printer.
So there's no number?
No number, no paper trail. You can buy all the other metal parts, the barrel, the slide, the trigger assembly online, totally legally, and then you assemble it yourself. It makes solving gun crimes nightmarishly difficult for law enforcement.
So physically, it seems like they have him dead to rights. They have the gun. They have the fake ID he used to check into a hostel under the name Mark Rosario. They have the diary. They have the confession note. But if the judge rules that that initial search at McDonald's was illegal,
then it all potentially goes away. The gun, the diary, the note, the ID, there's all fruit of the poisonous tree. If the search of the tree is illegal, the evidence is inadmissible. You can't use a gun found in an illegal search to prove a murder charge. The prosecution's case would be, well, it would be gutted.
And that ruling is coming up soon, right?
The judge is set to rule on the motion to suppress in May 2026. And the tension around that single decision is just incredibly high.
That is just wild to think about. You could have the guy who essentially wrote, "I did it," in a notebook, who had the murder weapon in his backpack, potentially walk free because an officer didn't call the bomb squad.
It is a distinct possibility within the American legal system. And it's a reminder that procedure matters just as much as truth inside a courtroom. If the police break the rules to catch the bad guy, sometimes the bad guy goes free. That is the price we, as a society, pay for the Fourth Amendment.
So while the lawyers are in court fighting over 11 minutes of video footage and deep constitutional law, the rest of the world, or at least the internet, has been doing something completely different with this story.
Oh, yeah.
We have to talk about the folk hero phenomenon.
This is, to me, perhaps the most disturbing and also the most fascinating aspect of this entire case. When you look at the sociological data, the polls show that about 1 in 4 Americans, 25%, sympathize with Luigi Mangione.
1 in 4.
And when you narrow that demographic down to just Gen Z, that number is even higher.
That's staggering. 25% of the country is looking at a man accused of a cold-blooded execution-style murder and saying, you know what? I kind of get it.
It's the Robin Hood narrative taking hold. But let's be very clear about this. Robin Hood stole gold from the rich to give to the poor. Luigi Mangione didn't give anyone money. He just killed a man.
But the public sentiment, the anger toward the healthcare industry is so toxic that people are projecting their own rage and frustration onto him. There was that quote from a social media user that went viral really early on.
My empathy is out of network.
My empathy is out of network. It's dark humor, but it cuts right to the heart of it. It's like people are saying, the system didn't show any empathy when my grandma was denied her cancer treatment, so why should I show any empathy for the CEO of that system?
Exactly. The trial in the court of public opinion isn't about the murder. It's a referendum on the entire system. And it is manifested in the most absurd ways imaginable.
I mean, we've seen search trends for Luigi Mangione loafers and ankles spiking by 1,400%.
Wait, ankles? People are actually searching for his ankles.
Yes. In one of his early court appearances, he was wearing loafers without any socks, so his ankles were visible. And suddenly, Luigi ankles is a trending search term on TikTok and X. It's this bizarre, twisted thirst trap culture colliding head-on with a murder trial.
It's like the Ted Bundy effect,
Yeah.
but supercharged by the speed of the internet.
And the sweater. Everyone was convinced he was wearing this super high-end Maison Margiela sweater.
Right, because he has that sort of preppy, old money look. The internet fashionistas were all over it. But it turned out to be, what, a Nordstrom house brand?
It was a generic sweater from Nordstrom, but it sold out almost instantly after he wore it. And then you have the Shein incident in September of 2025.
Oh, this was unbelievable.
An AI-generated image of Luigi Mangione looking like a model appeared on their website wearing one of their shirts.
An AI model of an accused murderer being used to sell fast fashion. We are truly living in a simulation.
It certainly feels like it sometimes, but there is a much darker side to this fandom. It's not just about buying sweaters and, thirsting over his ankles.
No, it's gotten much more real than that. You have reports of inmates in various prisons shouting "Free Luigi" during riots. You have these look-alike contests happening in Washington Square Park in New York with hundreds of people showing up dressed like him.
And they're targeting the people who helped catch him.
That's right. People have been review bombing that specific McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania, giving it one-star reviews because the employee snitched on him.
Review bombing a McDonald's because their minimum wage employee helped the police catch a suspected murderer. That just highlights how deeply angry people are. They're willing to overlook the absolute brutality of the crime because they hate the victim's profession that much.
It's a fundamental breakdown of the social contract. When a large enough portion of the population feels the system is completely broken and rigged against them, they start rooting for the person who breaks the system, even if he does it with a 3D printed gun.
And that brings us right back to the legal labyrinth we're in at this very moment. Because while the internet is busy making memes, the courts are trying to figure out who actually gets to put this guy on trial. This is the mess of jurisdiction you mentioned at the top.
It is a jurisdictional nightmare. Just think about the map for a second. Pennsylvania has him on state weapons charges because that's where he was caught with the gun.
Okay.
New York State has him on a murder charge because that's where the killing actually happened.
Makes sense.
And then the federal government, the DOJ, has him on federal stalking and firearms charges because he crossed state lines with the intent to commit the crime.
So you have 3 different sovereign entities all trying to take a bite out of the same apple. And usually these things get worked out pretty cleanly behind closed doors, right? The different prosecutors' offices coordinate and decide, okay, you go first, then we'll go.
Usually, yes. But the stakes here are so intensely political. You have to remember, back in April of 2025, the Department of Justice, and this was a directive that came down from the Trump administration and Attorney General Bondi, they announced they were seeking the death penalty.
Right. And that was a huge deal because New York State doesn't have the death penalty. It was abolished years ago. So this felt like the Fed stepping in to say, the state punishment isn't enough. We want the ultimate punishment. It felt like a political power move.
It absolutely was. But then we had a massive, massive twist just a few weeks ago. On January 30th of this year, 2026, Judge Margaret Garnett, who is a federal judge, she dismissed the specific federal murder charges that are actually eligible for the death penalty.
Whoa. Why? I mean, how do you just dismiss a murder charge when you have the guy?
It was a very technical ruling based on the specific statutes they used. She ruled that the charges were legally incompatible with the separate stalking charges. Essentially, the way the law was written, you couldn't charge him with both stalking resulting in death and murder in the very specific way the prosecution had constructed their indictment. It's legally complex, but the end result is very simple.
The death penalty is gone.
As of today, February 18th, the death penalty is completely off the table.
So the feds lost their biggest stick.
Correct. Now, the government might appeal that ruling, but for now, the threat of execution has vanished. And that really changes the entire dynamic of the case. If the feds can't execute him, their case suddenly loses some of its priority status, at least in the eyes of the public.
And let's not forget the terrorism charges they tried to stick him with in New York.
Right. The state prosecutors initially tried to charge him with murder as an act of terrorism.
What does that mean legally?
In New York, terrorism has a very specific legal definition. It requires the act to have been carried out with the intent to intimidate or coerce a civilian population, or to influence a government by intimidation.
And the judge didn't buy it.
No. Back in September of 2025, a New York judge, Judge Caro, dismissed that specific charge. He ruled that basically targeting one specific CEO of one specific company, no matter how powerful, doesn't meet the legal threshold of intimidating the entire population.
So he lowered the charge to a standard second-degree murder.
Exactly. So if you're keeping score, Mangione has actually had a string of pretty significant legal victories lately. The terrorism enhancement was thrown out, and the federal death penalty has been taken off the table.
Which brings us full circle back to that shouting match in the courtroom on February 6th, double jeopardy. Why is he yelling that? What triggered it?
It's all about the schedule. The New York State murder trial is currently set to begin on June 8th, 2026. Meanwhile, the federal jury selection for their trial is set to start on September 8th, 2026.
So he's looking at back-to-back federal and state trials.
Right. And in his mind, and probably in the mind of any normal person, he's thinking, you are trying me for the exact same act twice.
Which, to a layperson, makes perfect sense. You kill one guy, you get one trial, you don't get tried in a New York court, and then if they don't get the result they want, get tried all over again by the feds for the exact same bullet.
In the court of common sense, you are absolutely right. But in a court of law, we have a legal doctrine called dual sovereignty. And this was just recently upheld by the Supreme Court in a case called Gamble v. United States.
Dual sovereignty.
The idea is that the state of New York is a sovereign entity. The federal government of the United States is a separate sovereign entity.
Yeah.
You can violate the laws of both of those sovereigns at the same time with a single act. So legally, they could try you twice for the same underlying crime if it violates two different sets of laws.
It really feels like a loophole, though.
It certainly feels that way to defendants, I'm sure. And Mangione's lawyers are making a much more practical argument. They're basically saying, how can we possibly prepare for a massive, complex state murder trial in June and then immediately pivot to prepare for a massive, complex federal trial in September? It's a logistical impossibility.
They're arguing it's just not physically possible to mount a competent defense for both at the same time.
Exactly. They're exhausted.
Hmm.
And they're arguing that this scheduling is intentionally punitive, that the government, having lost on the death penalty and terrorism charges, is now just trying to crush them with paperwork and burn them out before a jury even sits.
I want to go back to his mind for a minute. We talked about the diary, but I want to go a little deeper into it. Because he wasn't just writing, I hate my insurance company. He had developed a whole philosophy around this.
He had. And when you analyze those writings that were unsealed back in June of 2025, you see a very clear and very chilling evolution in his thinking. He actually considered a bombing first.
A bomb.
Yes. He wrote about a potential mass casualty bombing at the United Healthcare corporate headquarters.
Whoa, so he could have killed hundreds of innocent people?
He absolutely could have. He had the technical know-how to build a device. But he rejected the idea. And his reasoning is just fascinatingly cold and logical.
What was his logic?
He wrote, and this is another near direct quote, "Do you bomb the HQ? No. Bombs equals terrorism." He believed that if he used a bomb, he would inevitably hurt innocent people, secretaries, janitors, cafeteria workers, and the political message would be completely lost. He would just be branded a terrorist in the eyes of the public.
So he viewed the assassination as, strategic? As a more effective marketing move for his ideology?
Yes, that's a perfect way to put it. He viewed it as a targeted assassination.
Yeah.
In his mind, he believed that by targeting the CEO, and only the CEO, he was keeping his hands clean of innocent blood. He saw himself as a soldier, a strategist, in a war against corporate power.
He wrote that he was the first to face the power games with brutal honesty.
It's this incredibly self-aggrandizing view. It's chillingly rational, but only within his own deeply irrational framework. And it reminds me of someone else.
You're thinking of the Unabomber.
Exactly. Ted Kaczynski.
And that's not just a casual comparison. There's a direct link, right?
There is. We know from his digital footprint that Mangione was influenced by him. He actually reviewed the Unabomber's manifesto, Industrial Society and Its Future, on Goodreads.
He reviewed it on Goodreads like it was a summer beach read he just finished.
He did. He gave it 4 out of 5 stars. He even wrote a short review where he called Kaczynski rightfully imprisoned because of the violence, but then called his ideas and his critique of modern society prescient. It shows he was marinating in these anti-system, anti-corporate ideas long before he ever bought the parts for that gun.
It's like he took the Unabomber's core philosophy, but then tried to optimize the violence to make it more palatable to the public. Kaczynski blew up random academics and airline executives. Mangione targeted the one guy that everyone already hates.
And, judging by the free Luigi t-shirts and the trending hashtags, you could argue he succeeded in a way Kaczynski never did. Kaczynski was universally reviled as a monster. Mangione is being treated like a darker, real-life version of a Marvel vigilante by a shocking number of people.
So, after all of that, where does this leave us right now? We are looking at a June 2026 start date for the New York State trial.
That is the next big date on the calendar. But everything, and I mean absolutely everything, hinges on what happens in May 2026. That is when the judge is scheduled to issue her ruling on the backpack evidence.
The McDonald's search. The fruit of the poisonous tree.
Yes. If that judge rules that Officer Wasser's search was illegal, if she decides the bomb threat was a pretext and there were no real exigent circumstances, then the backpack is out, the gun is out, the diary is out, the note is out.
And if the gun is out, then the prosecution can't match the ballistics from that gun to the shell casings they found in New York.
Exactly. The case doesn't completely vanish overnight. They would still have some surveillance footage of him in the area. They still have the motive from his other writings. They can place him in New York at the time. But the direct physical link, the smoking gun, literally disappears from the evidence table.
It becomes a much, much harder case to prove beyond a reasonable doubt.
An exponentially harder case.
And if that happens and he walks, or even if he just gets a much lighter sentence on a lesser charge, the country is going to explode.
It would be a legal and a cultural earthquake. On one side, you'd have absolute outrage that a man who everyone knows is a killer got off on a legal technicality. On the other side, you'd have his supporters declaring it a massive victory against a corrupt system.
Which really brings us to the so what of this whole deep dive. I mean, why does this one case matter so much to you, the listener, right now?
It matters because this case has become a stress test for our entire society. It's testing the legal system's ability to handle this kind of jurisdictional chaos. It's testing the police's ability to follow constitutional rules, even when they're under immense pressure and think they've got their guy.
Yeah.
And maybe most importantly, it's testing our collective moral compass.
Right. It forces all of us to ask some really uncomfortable questions. How frustrated are we with corporate power in America? And at what point, if ever, does that frustration justify violence? The fact that so many people are looking at this and saying, maybe, is the real story here.
It really is. It highlights this dangerous breakdown in the social contract. When people feel that the system is parasitic, to use Mangione's own word, they start rooting for the parasite cleanser no matter how brutal his methods are.
So, as we all watch the news in the coming months, keep your eye on that ruling about the backpack. It's not just some dry legal motion. It is the linchpin of this entire saga.
And as you watch, ask yourself this. If that evidence is suppressed because of that 11-minute gap and the lack of a warrant, and if this folk hero narrative continues to grow and solidify, what happens when a jury of 12 regular people is finally seated in that courtroom in June?
That is the terrifying question. Because juries are made of people, and people are the ones who are buying the sweaters and posting the memes and feeling that anger every time they open a medical bill. So are we about to watch a murder trial, or are we about to watch a referendum on the American healthcare system?
I fear it might be the latter. And justice is very rarely found in a referendum.
We will be watching closely, and we'll be back with another deep dive as soon as that ruling drops in May. Until then, stay curious.
Indeed.
Thanks for listening.